I got to Reed, all I wanted to do was join the anthropology program. I took every program that was offered, took every class that was offered in every time slot that I could fill, and I eventually wrote my thesis on cargo cults in the South Pacific. For those of you who don't know, cargo cults were apocalyptic movements where Pacific Islanders would use rituals to try to get Western material culture. Because of the colonial situation, they couldn't trade shell necklaces for things like canned goods or cars, so they had to create elaborate ceremonies to encourage the ancestors to bring them goods and consequently the power the whites had. It was incredibly interesting to me, and I had dreams of graduating from Reed and living in a jungle in Papua New Guinea, drinking kava and learning about the magical properties of cassowary feathers. I was stoked, but by the time I finished my senior year and started to compare myself to fellow classmates, I realized that I just didn't have what it takes to be an academic. I didn't have an encyclopedic knowledge of social theory. I think I would have been great at the ethnographic side of anthropology, but I would have been terrible at the professorial side. When there are 500 applications for each University of Chicago level teaching position in anthropology, I just knew that I would never be competitive enough to do it at the level that would nurture and sustain the passion I had for it. Obviously, this was a heartbreaking place to find myself in. I spent 4 years getting a degree that in some ways felt useless. But then the day after graduation, I still had to get a job, and so I went looking. I applied to 3 places and chose one. The first job I applied for was as a cement truck driver at a construction company. And the second job turned out to be a pyramid scheme that involved selling shower heads door to door. It's true, and it turned out other Reedies were operating the pyramid scheme. I don't want to go there. And then the third job was for an internet consulting firm here in town. They had put an ad in the paper for people with linguistics backgrounds to do some search engine development. And as it turned out, I had taken Linguistics 311 here at Reed. I finished with a C in the course and had forgotten most of what I learned, but in the interview I talked up my vast knowledge of linguistics and I got the job. But see, it didn't matter that I didn't know what I was talking about, because because I knew that all they had to do was give me a pile of reading materials and I could figure out how to do the job better than people who did know what they were talking about. It's like when you have to take that random divisional course to graduate. You know, like you're a psych major and you have to take history of the Third Reich and you don't read half the books and only vaguely pay attention to the lectures, but when the paper and final comes, you still get an A because you know how to skim all the material, find the points that matter, and then pontificate like you're an expert. Yeah, that skill that got me through biology is the same one that got me my first job. And it's the same one that will get you your first job when the time comes. As for the rest of my story, it's funny how life works out. While working for the internet firm, I picked up a little business experience, but eventually lost my job during the market crash of 2001. I realized that I enjoyed working with businesses, but I hated making the partners in my firm even richer than they already were. So in the meantime, I had read Hernando de Soto's The Mystery of Capital, which explained quite simply why capitalism thrives in the West, but flounders in the developing countries. From this, I started to get interested in microfinance, and then volunteered at a small nonprofit in Washington, D.C., working with Latino small businesses. Again, I really didn't know what I was doing, but I read a lot about it, and with a little experience, I was able to parlay up from a volunteer position to a job. And that first step became a long and passionate career in economic development that continues to this day. I've served in the Peace Corps and later with the UN, both in Mongolia, helping sheep herders build better businesses and get access to capital. I spent several years in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, helping Vietnamese shrimp and oyster fishermen recover from the storms and get their boats back in the water. And now I work with coastal First Nations in Canada to develop economic independence on their own terms. I've had rich and wonderful experiences that have spanned the world, and honestly, I'm only getting started. So there's a couple of themes that I hope you've taken from this story. The first is that in a roundabout way, I eventually got to do the same things that I wanted to do in anthropology, but in a totally different context. The thing that I was so passionate about is eventually what I got to do. I just had to find an alternate path there. So the bottom line is don't give up hope. Academia is not the only way. The second thing is that strangely, my thesis was actually pertinent. When I wrote it, I only thought about cargo cults from the ritualistic side. I was caught up in the amazing difference of the other. I never realized until years later that I'd really been studying economic development and how people perceive and react unexpectedly to Western economic paradigms. Those aspects of my thesis have become vital to my work, even though I wasn't consciously focusing on them at the time. So don't sell your academic experiences short. Try to find new ways to apply them and use them in your career. The last and probably most important thing is that I didn't leave Reed with a career. In those early days when I was deciding between cement truck driver and showerhead salesman, I was scared shitless. I had no idea how this was all going to work out. But I used my READ education to hustle up a few opportunities, figure out what I liked, and then develop a longer-term plan for what I was truly passionate about. And I'm not alone. For a different random cross-section of data, consider just my housemates in the Red Door house. Red Door. Anyway, at Reed, their majors included political science, Spanish, psychology, biology, religion, classics, and physics. Just a few years after graduation, those same people had occupations at the time including eco-protester in Slovakia, waitress in Chicago, English teacher in China, breast cancer researcher in Puerto Rico, master's candidate at Harvard, bartender in New York, and Peace Corps volunteer in Ghana. Now, today, those same Reedies occupations are Baton Rouge city planner, domestic violence call center manager, senior investment manager at GE Capital, winemaker at Gainey Vineyards, literary novelist and stay-at-home mom, assistant district attorney for the city of Grass Valley, and a civil engineer in Anchorage, Alaska. If there's any commonality between all of these diverse outcomes, it's that they all went to Reed and got a degree, any type of degree. They all went out in their 20s and did fun, exciting things all over the world that weren't exactly pertinent to their careers. And then by their 30s, they all had nice, boring, well-paying jobs. So for that whole weird, random assortment of Reedies, it all worked out. One other commonality is that we all scrounged together each day for both lunch and dinner. I'm sure that was fundamental to our success. So if I were to give you any advice today from this vantage point in my post-Reed career, it would be the following. Don't stress out. It's cool. You don't need to have it all figured out. You have no idea what's going to happen 15 years from now, so stop stressing out. Just focus on finding out what you're truly passionate about. Try different things out. Find out what you enjoy doing 8 hours a day, 52 weeks a year. You may not know this, but let me guarantee you, you have a lot of time to figure it out. So enjoy this time while you have it. And for those of you with crippling student loan debt who are thinking to themselves, dude, you are so wrong, I need to stress out right now. Well, let me assure you too, I amassed over $100,000 in student loan debt, and I haven't really paid for any of it. and I still have good credit. Right after school, you have a few years of deferrals and forbearances you can use, and then you can consolidate your loans and get a few more years of deferrals and forbearances. You can defer during school, Peace Corps service, AmeriCorps service, etc. You've got a lot of options and you should use them. Don't jump into something just because you feel like you have to make money. Take some time and find something both lucrative and interesting when the time comes. Another thing to think about is don't try to force a linear path. Be adaptive and incremental. The hardest thing for you at this point in your career is that you have no history. You have a relatively empty CV, and it might seem impossible to find the right entry-level job. But the fact is, you don't need the perfect job right out of school. What you need, in my opinion, is a set of experiences that will better position you to seize opportunities when they arise. You need to become adaptive. There are a few ways that I think you can do that. The first is to develop transferable skills. As you fill that blank page of a CV, you should be putting together a package of skills, knowledge, and experiences that allow you to shift horizontally as well as vertically. You might need to bounce around the work world for a while to get on the career track that you want, which might mean moving horizontally across disciplines before you get the opportunity to move up within one. So for example, if you want to work in advertising, but you can't get in at Wieden & Kennedy, then go to a temp agency and get an administrative assistant job anywhere they'll send you. Maybe you'll be answering phones and taking notes at the Friends Bakery corporate office. It doesn't matter where you go, because you'll be building some basic transferable skills. Then, when Wieden & Kennedy needs an administrative job filled, you can apply and get in the door that way. Or if you want to be a corporate accountant at Ernst & Young, then learn some Excel and get a data entry job somewhere. It will suck and be boring for a while, but it will give you the kind of skills that you can transfer to a better opportunity later. Developing those skills works hand in hand with the next part of being adaptive, and that is to volunteer. And by volunteering, I don't mean working in a soup kitchen, although that is a noble pursuit. I mean instead that your greatest asset right now is that you're cheap labor. So capitalize on it. Following on the advertising example, put an ad on Craigslist saying that you'll help people develop communications plans for free. Find an association of freelancers and offer to help them on projects for free. Or if you did get that administrative assistant job, then go to the account executives and say, hey, if you have any little projects that you might need help on, I can stay after work and put a few extra hours on them. Managers usually respond well to this sort of thing and might throw you a few tidbits just to see how well you do. You should also look for structured volunteer opportunities like the Peace Corps or AmeriCorps, other things like that. They lend you high credibility, give you a great experience, and create a lasting network. In the end, volunteering your time in any context allows you to build a portfolio of experiences that will allow you to grab a job that you're really interested in when it pops up. One last extension of this, especially following the volunteering example, is to be entrepreneurial. Don't wait for your path to develop it, but develop it yourself. The best skills you can get are the ones you get through building something on your own, seeing it fail, and then building something again. I've started a few nonprofits, started 5 nonprofits or NGOs. The first was a nonprofit techno dance party cooperative that sponsored a club night and parties at Reed, as well as around the Pacific Northwest. It was freeform, and I learned the basics of building something with moving parts. The next 2 organizations were an online journal on globalization and a microfinance interest group. With these, I learned how to incorporate organizations and fundraise. Now I have 2 new organizations, one in New Orleans, that's a disaster recovery organization, and then my own personal consultancy. These 2 are actually the real deal and are serving a wide variety of clients. The interesting part of being entrepreneurial is that you get to learn and fail freely. In the early stages, you can experiment as much as you want, and if it fails, you never have to put it on your CV. But you can still talk about the experience and demonstrate that you're not only a self-starter, but you also have some entrepreneurial experience in the field you're interested in. This is worth more to employers than most jobs ever will. To end my little remarks today, I thought I'd show a few photos that might put some of this into perspective. Boom. So that's me in 1995 as a freshman. This is my first day at Reed. I'm the one over here on the left. Note the long hair and nerdy demeanor. This is me a few years later in the Peace Corps working with some herders. This is me a few years later in graduate school doing some work for the World Bank in Cambodia. This is me a couple of years later in New Orleans providing grants and loans to Vietnamese fishermen. This is me on a shrimp boat. This is a couple of years later during the BP oil spill, working with African-American oystermen down on the Gulf Coast. And then this is a year ago working with the Namgis First Nation in Western Canada doing some economic development work. These photos are 10 years of a career. They're really only a few chapters of my life. My passion was to help people who are struggling to eke out an existence, and I used my Reed education to build a career in the nonprofit sector. So the question remains today, what is your passion? How are you going to pursue it? As the staff and alumni of Reed College, we encourage you to talk with us over the weekend and get some insights into different career opportunities. If you want to learn more about the nonprofit world, especially starting your own, come to our panel tomorrow at 2:45. Plug. If not, check out one of the others. We're all here to help you follow the paths we took or get you started on your own. The one last thing I would want to show you is that's me in 1996 with a girl named Ann that was in my dorm. She lived upstairs from me. She transferred after a couple years. We kind of talked off and on over the years, no big deal. 2008, we kind of hooked back up again, got married, had this little baby. So I'm showing you this just to show you that, number one, I'm a Reed statistic, marrying another Reedy. But number two, and more importantly, you have no idea. I can't say it enough times. You have no idea what's going to happen over the next 10 years of your life, 15 years of your life. So don't worry about it. Just go out there, pursue your passion, do something interesting and exciting, and then let that world unfold in front of you. Thank you very much.
All right, and I think the last speaker is a deadly duo of an example of networking in action and an alumnus and a current student and their collaborations.
I'm Michael Tippy, 1980 chemistry, and this is Sarah Johnson, class of 13,
yeah,
right?
Junior biology major.
Yeah, so we had the good fortune to be connected by her mother, who's over there. Gloria and I, her mother, were chemistry students together at Reed many years ago. And I don't know, it just worked out. So first of all, I'd like to frame this so you understand what we're talking about, because Sarah and I engaged in a process over a couple of months that was pretty complicated. And so I want to frame this, this by telling you a bit about who we are and what we do.